Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. The Hemingway Family. The Hemingway that brought the family to international prominence was the writer Ernest Hemingway. But to talk about the curse, we have to go one branch higher on the family tree to Ernest's father and mother, Clarence and Grace Hemingway. Clarence was a doctor. His wife, Grace, was an opera singer before they got married. She left her career as a singer when she got married, but continued a career in the music field. She taught music and singing lessons and was a fairly in-demand teacher. She brought home more money than her husband. Ernest did not like his mother and father's relationship. He thought his mother was controlling and his father was subservient. Ernest also said that his mother sometimes dressed him like a girl when he was a child. Then she took him and his sister out in public and told people that they were twins. We're not sure why Grace did this, but it's possible she was dealing with mental health issues. Regardless, Ernest felt more connected to his father and did many outdoor activities with him, like hunting and fishing. However, Clarence had a violent streak, making their relationship difficult. Another major reason Ernest hated his mother is because he blamed her for his father's death. Clarence had several health problems, like diabetes and angina pectoris. He also struggled with his mental health. In the late 1920s, he had financial issues. On December 6, 1928, 57-year-old Clarence Hemingway shot himself. Ernest believed that Grace's domineering ways worsened his father's mental health issues, and this led to his death. Ernest hated his mother so much and was so angry about the fate of his father that when his mother died in 1951, at age 79, he did not attend the funeral. Many people believe that Clarence's death was the start of a family curse that lasted generations. One of the people who was impacted by the curse was Ernest. Ernest Hemingway published his first novel, The Sun Also Rises, in 1926. He had a long, illustrious career publishing other works, including A Farewell to Arms, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and The Old Man and the Sea. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 1953 and the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1954. But before all that, he was an ambulance driver during World War I. He was stationed in Italy when, in June 1918, he and two other men were injured. One of the men only survived because Ernest helped him. Ernest received the Silver Medal of Valor. In 1921, Ernest and his first wife, Hadley Richardson, moved to Paris, France. In the City of Lights, he was part of a famous literary circle called The Lost Generation. This group included other writers like F. Scott Fitzgerald, T.S. Eliot, and Gertrude Stein. Although Ernest succeeded in his writing career, he suffered several misfortunes. For example, in 1954, he was in 2 plane crashes in 2 days. He also suffered from depression and alcoholism for most of his life. In hopes of treating his mental health issues, he checked into the Mayo Clinic and underwent electroshock convulsotherapy. He checked in at the end of 1960 and stayed 7 weeks. Unfortunately, the therapy didn't seem to alleviate his struggles, and he spoke about wanting to take his own life to his then wife, Mary. Mary became worried, and in April 1961, she saw him with his gun. So Ernest was again admitted to the Mayo Clinic, and he received more electroshock convulsotherapy. He stayed several weeks and checked out in late June 1961. Days later, on July 12, 1961, 61-year-old Ernest Hemingway fatally shot himself in the head. Mary, who was Hemingway's 4th wife, initially said it was an accident. She said he was cleaning his gun and it went off, but it was later determined he had taken his own life. Ernest died just like his father. They both shot themselves with their own guns. However, the tragedies wouldn't end there. Two of Ernest's 5 siblings also took their own lives. Ursula overdosed on prescription meds in 1966, only 5 years after Ernest's death. She also suffered from depression and had cancer at the time. In 1982, his brother Lester shot himself. He had diabetes and also suffered from depression. While it was incredibly sad that 3 siblings and their father died at their own hands, what is even worse is that the tragedies didn't end with them. Ernest's first marriage to Hadley produced one son, Jack. After an affair with Hadley's friend, Pauline Pfeiffer, Ernest divorced Hadley and married Pauline 4 months later. She was married to Ernest from 1927 to 1940. They had 2 children together, Gregory and Patrick. Pauline came from money and was financially well off. She cared for the family financially while Ernest was still building his career as a writer. Gregory dealt with gender dysmorphia and transitioned to a woman during the 1990s. After transitioning, he used the name Gloria. But decades earlier, in 1951, 19-year-old Gloria was arrested for trying to use a woman's washroom at a movie theater. After the arrest, Ernest and Pauline argued. Ernest reportedly blamed her for their child's situation. The next day, October 1st, 1951, Pauline Pfeiffer died at age 56. She had an adrenal tumor and it burst. It's believed that the stress from the argument caused it to burst. Ernest ultimately blamed Gloria for her mother's death. Like many people in the Hemingway family, Gloria struggled with her mental health. She suffered from alcohol use disorder and bipolar disorder. In 2001, 69-year-old Gloria was arrested for indecent exposure. She died of heart failure while in jail. Margot Hemingway was the daughter of Jack Hemingway, the son of Ernest and his first wife, Hadley. She was a supermodel and an actress who starred in mostly B movies. Her life had its struggles as well. Margot suffered from depression and used drugs and alcohol to medicate herself. She also had epilepsy and an eating disorder. In 1988, she checked into the Betty Ford Clinic to deal with her addictions. Sadly, on July 1st, 1966, which was just 1 day shy of the 35th anniversary of her grandfather Ernest's death, 41-year-old Margot died. Her death was ruled an intentional overdose of acute barbiturates. Mariel Hemingway, who is also an actress, later said that Margot's trauma could also be attributed to abuse that she suffered at the hands of their father. As for Mariel, she has somewhat managed to escape the family curse. She has had a successful acting career. She starred in movies like Star 80 and Personal Best. However, she has had her own struggles with depression, but Mariel has devoted her life to advocating for wellness. So while the curse has followed the Hemingway family for multiple generations, perhaps it will now serve as a lesson and help people through Mariel's work. Number 2. The Getty Family. While the curse of the Hemingway family seems connected to mental health issues, the curse of our next family seems to be connected to greed. It all starts with John Paul Getty Sr., who went by Paul. Paul was born in 1892 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. When he was 11 years old, his family moved to Oklahoma and found wealth in the oil industry. In 1914, at the age of 21, Paul received $10,000 to make investments. That is over $300,000 in 2024. Among other things, he made oil deals in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. From that seed money, he made billions of dollars. In 1957, Fortune magazine named him the richest man in America. They believed his worth was between $700 million and $1 billion. In 2024, that is between $8.1 billion at $11.6 billion. In 1966, the Guinness Book of World Records named him the richest private citizen in the world. They estimated he was worth about $1.2 billion. In 2024, that is $14 billion. While John Paul Getty Sr. was very good at making money, he seemed less capable of building great familial relationships. He was married 5 times and had 5 sons, and if that wasn't enough, he had plenty of extramarital affairs. No one in his family liked him very much. When he was dying in 1976, at the age of 83, none of his family members were there for him on his deathbed. However, he wasn't alone. Some of his mistresses and his dogs were there. However, Paul died after several of his sons were dead. Paul's youngest son was Timothy Ware Getty. In 1958, Timothy died at only age 12 of a brain tumor. This was a year after he was named the richest man in America. Paul apparently complained incessantly about the medical bills associated with Timothy's illness. When his 12-year-old son died, Paul didn't go to the funeral. He said he was too busy. Paul's third son, John Paul Jr., was married to Abigail Harris. John Paul Jr. became addicted to heroin. He left his wife in 1964 to be with actress Talitha Paul. She also abused heroin. In 1971, Talitha Paul died of a heroin overdose. As you'll see later, this was not the last major personal problem John Paul Jr. had. Paul's eldest son, George Franklin, passed away in 1973 in a shocking way. He was addicted to barbiturates and alcohol. He was found dead after he was stabbed twice with a barbecue fork. Some people believe he fell onto it, but it would have been unlikely he would have done that twice. Instead, the consensus is that he stabbed himself. He also had high levels of drugs and alcohol in his system. He was only 48 when he died. Something else happened to the Getty family in 1973 that made headlines around the world. Paul's grandson, 16-year-old John Paul Getty III, was in Italy. John Paul III was the son of John Paul Jr., whose second wife died from an overdose. John Paul III was a product of John Paul Jr.'s first marriage to Abigail Harris. In 1973, John Paul III was kidnapped and held in a cave in Calabria, Italy. The kidnappers demanded about $17 million from John Paul Jr. for the safe return of his son. John Paul Jr. didn't have enough money to pay the ransom. He asked his father, Paul, to help. But Paul, the richest man in the world, refused to pay. He also refused to talk to John Paul III's mother about the kidnapping. However, Paul did talk to the press. He said, quote, "I have 14 grandchildren, and if I pay a penny of ransom, I'll have 14 kidnapped grandchildren," unquote. He also speculated that it was a hoax by his grandson to extort some money. The kidnappers decided to send a message to the family through a newspaper in Italy. They sent the newspaper a package which contained a lock of John Paul's bloody hair and his severed right ear. Also in the package was a note with a lower ransom demand. Instead of $17 million, they wanted $3.2 million. Paul, who was worth $2 billion at the time, finally agreed to pay some of the ransom. He would put up $2.2 million, which was the maximum amount that was tax deductible. He lent his son the additional $1 million at a 4% interest rate. Weeks after the money was paid, John Paul III was released. He had spent 5 months in captivity. It turned out that the organized crime syndicate under Gaeta was responsible for the kidnapping. 2 of the people involved in the kidnapping were convicted and imprisoned. The story of the kidnapping is the basis for the 2017 movie All the Money in the World and the 2008 TV series Trust. John Paul III had a lot of mental health problems after being released. He became addicted to drugs and alcohol. In 1981, when he was 25, he overdosed on drugs and had a stroke. This left him paralyzed, visually impaired, and unable to speak. He lived that way for 29 years and then died in 2011 at age 54. Gordon Getty was Paul's fourth son. He was seemingly the golden child. Everyone felt that out of Paul's 5 sons, he was the one who had it the most together. He didn't seem to suffer from addictions or any of the other burdens the family endured. He seemed like a stable family man. So it was even more shocking when, in 1999, it was revealed that he had a secret family. It came out because Gordon's mistress, Cynthia Beck, wanted her children to use the Getty surname, and she wanted to get a cut of the family money. The next generation of the Getty family has had its own tragedies. Along with John Paul III's kidnapping and subsequent stroke, there were 2 of Gordon's children who died at relatively young ages. John Paul Gilbert Getty died in November 2020 at age 52 of an accidental fentanyl overdose. John Gilbert's brother, Andrew, died at age 47 from intestinal bleeding, which was likely the result of methamphetamine use. Number 1. The Von Erich Family. Our last family is most well known by a surname that isn't even theirs. They are the Von Erich family, but their real last name is Atkinson. The last name Von Erich ultimately became a stage name for the entire family, but it all began with Fritz Von Erich, or actually, Jack Barton Atkinson. Jack was born on August 16, 1929 in Jewett, Texas. He played football in the 1950s, but soon entered the world of professional wrestling. Early in his career, he worked with the legendary Stu Hart. Hart told him he looked German. Even though Jack had no German ancestry, he took on the ring name Fritz Von Erich. Jack was a heel, which in wrestling terms means villain. And Jack wasn't just portraying a typical German person. Instead, he was a Nazi. His finishing move was called the Iron Claw. His persona of a Nazi is how many people believe the curse began. The story goes that the ghost of a Holocaust survivor visited Jack. He was offended that Jack was making money by making a joke out of being a Nazi. The ghost showed Jack his tattoo from his time in a concentration camp and told Jack he lost his 7 sons during the Holocaust. The ghost told Jack he hoped he didn't suffer the same fate. Jack was married to his wife Doris from 1950 until 1992. They had 6 sons together. Jack owned and operated World Class Championship Wrestling, also known as WCCW. He wanted his sons to be the promotion's biggest stars. Over time, many of his sons became famous wrestlers. They all took on the last name Von Erich. Unlike their father, they were faces, which are good guys in wrestling. Tragically, most of Jack's sons met tragic ends. Jack Jr., the eldest of Jack and Doris's children, was born on September 21, 1952. On March 7, 1959, 6-year-old Jack was electrocuted after stepping on an exposed wire. He may have survived, but he fell face first into a puddle and he drowned. David, Jack's 3rd son, was born on July 22, 1958. He became known in wrestling as the Yellow Rose of Texas. On June 26, 1978, he married Candy McLeod. Candy gave birth in October 1978 to a daughter, Natasha Zoanna Atkinson. Tragically, Natasha died after 13 weeks from sudden infant death syndrome. David and Candy divorced in 1979. David remarried in 1982. In February 1984, the Von Erich family was doing a tour in Japan. Not long after they arrived, David was found dead in his hotel room. There are conflicting reports as to his cause of death. The Japanese coroner said that David's small intestine was inflamed, then it burst, and this ultimately led to him having a heart attack. However, wrestler Ric Flair said that his death was the result of a drug overdose. He said another wrestler who was with David got rid of the drugs before the authorities arrived. Another wrestler, Bill Irwin, said that David had bulimia, and this was part of the cause of his death. David's father, Jack, has stated that David was sick for 6 weeks leading up to his death, suggesting that his cause of death wasn't related to any of the aforementioned theories. David's brother, Kevin, said he's positive that his brother did not die from a drug overdose. Regardless of how or why he died, David was 25 when he died, making him the second of Jack's sons to die young. Mike was the fifth son. He was known as the inspirational warrior. Mike wasn't passionate about performing. He preferred to be behind the camera, not in the ring. After David's death, he was pressured to join in a performance capacity. He had difficulty in the ring and injured his shoulder while the family was on tour in Israel. He had surgery on it, and he suffered toxic shock syndrome, which caused brain damage. As a result, his personality changed. He dealt with these health issues for the rest of his life. In April 1987, Mike was supposed to participate in an event, but he never arrived at the venue. He had recently been arrested for DUI and drug possession. He was then found in the woods, having passed away from an overdose of pills. He was only 23 years old. There are reports that he left 2 notes, one for his brothers that reads, "Please understand, I'm a fuck up, I'm sorry," and one for his parents that reads, "Mom and Dad, I have gone to a better place, I'll be watching." So by 1987, 3 of the 6 sons in the family died before the age of 30. The youngest von Erich, Chris, was born on September 30th, 1969. He wanted to be a wrestler and loved performing, but he lacked the talent and the physical attributes. He was smaller than his brothers and suffered from asthma and brittle bones. Those medical issues made it difficult for him to wrestle. His brittle bones left him susceptible to injury. In September 1991, he broke his arm. Disappointment with his career, compounded by the sadness he felt over the death of his older brother Mike, became very difficult for him to manage. On September 21st, 1991, the 21-year-old shot himself in the head. Kerry, the 4th son, was born on February 3rd, 1960. His wrestling nicknames were the Modern Day Warrior and the Texas Tornado. He has 2 daughters, one is named Lacey, and she's a wrestler today. In 1990, Kerry signed with the WWF, which later became the WWE. When he signed, he had several secrets. In 1986, he was in a motorcycle accident, and his right leg was badly injured. As a result, he had to have his right foot amputated. He wrestled using a prosthetic. The second secret was that he was addicted to drugs. In February 1993, Kerry was arrested for possession of cocaine, and there was a potential that he would serve jail time. With all these difficulties, Kerry became depressed, and he often spoke about wanting to take his own life. He thought his 4 brothers were waiting for him. On February 18, 1993, 33-year-old Kerry fatally shot himself in the chest. That's 5 brothers who died between 1959 and 1993. The only brother to make it past age 33 was Kevin, the second son, who was born on May 15, 1957. His wrestling nickname was the Golden Warrior. He married Pamela May on August 1, 1980, and they had 4 children together. Even though Kerry didn't die at a young age, it doesn't mean he didn't have his own difficulties. After Kerry died, Kevin decided it was time to leave wrestling altogether. Understandably, he was depressed after losing all 5 of his brothers, and he contemplated taking his own life. He said he even went to a gun store with the express purpose of obtaining a gun to end his life. Kevin didn't do it because a fan told him how much he loved him, and that encouraged Kevin to keep going. Jack, the family patriarch, outlived 5 of his 6 sons. He died at the age of 68 in 1997 of brain and lung cancer. But the Von Erich legacy lives on. In 2009, the family was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, with only Kevin there to accept the honor on behalf of his family. The legacy also continues with the younger generation. Along with Carrie's daughter, Lacey, Kevin's 2 sons, Marshall and Ross, are wrestlers who use the Von Erich stage name. Also, the Von Erich family continues to intrigue audiences even today, as there's a critically acclaimed 2023 biopic about them called The Iron Claw. It stars Zac Efron and Jeremy Allen White. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.